Hey there, and welcome back as we continue our tour of the New World Wonders. So far, we've gone to the ancient city of Chichen Itza, we visited Rapa Nui, and we've gone to Colorado and seen Mesa Verde. This week, we're heading to South America. Machu Picchu is located in the Andes Mountains in Peru at an elevation of 2,350 meters and sits 80 kilometers from Cusco. It was constructed by the Inca and eventually lost to time. Eventually, it was stumbled upon in 1911, but we're going to get more into that later. We aren't exactly certain when Machu Picchu was built. The Incas didn't leave behind a written language. Instead, they left behind a knot system called quipu. The knots were tied into lengths of rope, and they would have recorded anything from ideas to accounts to dates to even statistics, but they can only tell us so much. Even though we don't know when it was lived in or built, we have a good idea. Unfortunately, the Inca Empire was very short-lived. It started around 1400 CE and ended around 1533 when the Spanish colonized South America. Because of this short time frame, we're able to say it was either occupied during the mid-15th century or the early to mid-16th century. There are other factors that point to when it was actually built, such as the style it was constructed in. It resembles other sites built during that time by an Incan ruler called Pachacuti Inca Yumpunqui. He ruled from 1438 to 1471, and he's considered the one that expanded the Inca Empire to make it what it was. He first started off by conquering the south of Peru, and then he decided to retire to his capital in Cusco. He then sent his brother and his son to conquer the rest of the Andes. One of his first acts was to grant anybody that spoke the Incan language, Quechua, citizenship. This allowed them to hold government or administrative positions. He also implemented a tax that was either paid for in labor or by goods. This was only for the people that the Inca conquered. The citizens didn't have to pay the tax. This made the Inca very unpopular, but it didn't stop them from expanding. The labor that was paid for in tax was used to create an extensive road network that was found all across the Incan Empire. The roads were used to link cities and sacred sites together. He also implemented a series of storage houses that were spread across the empire. These were to store food and were distributed to people when harvest was low. This made sure that people all across the empire were fed and could continue to work for him. The last thing he did was implement a fixed calendar. This set out days for the market and public holidays. Sites like Sacsayhuaman have led us to believe that Pachacuti is actually the one responsible for building Machu Picchu. Sacsayhuaman was a fortress-like structure built to protect Cusco. You've probably noticed a running theme already, and it's we don't really know what Machu Picchu is used for. What we do know is that Machu Picchu means old hill and is thought to have been founded sometime around 1450 CE. But like I said, we don't know what the site was used for. There's several different theories. The first being a fortress of sorts where the Inca rulers could escape to, or possibly a ceremonial precinct, or possibly a show of power, or even a religious center. We don't really know, but we do know that there are some defensive structures, but we don't know what they were used for either. They may have just been used to keep out the unworthy. Machu Picchu did have roads that connected it to other settlements around the valley, and it's thought that Machu Picchu may have had around 1,000 people living there. When Pachacuti died, it was passed down to his successor, and then so on. Machu Picchu covers an area of 32,592 hectares, and if that means nothing to you, that's alright. It's slightly larger than the city of Dublin, Ireland, and slightly smaller than Philadelphia. Machu Picchu was built in such a way that it actually blends into the mountain it was built on. It's made up of around 200 structures that were used for ceremonial, religious, agricultural, and even astronomical reasons. When you think of Machu Picchu, the first thing that probably comes to mind are the amazing stepped terraces. This area, unsurprisingly, is called the Farming District. The Farming District is located in the southeastern part of the site, and is the only area that has fertile enough ground to grow crops. They constructed irrigation channels that ran through the terraces, and the way that they built them actually prevented the soil from being eroded when the water flowed through. Located around the Farming District are the city gate, or possibly a guard tower, the funerary rock, and a cemetery. There are also 5 buildings that possibly served as living quarters for those working the land. The second thing that probably comes to mind when you think of Machu Picchu are the buildings, and these would have belonged to the urban district. And this is where we find the most popular buildings: the Temple of the Sun, the Room of 3 Windows, and the Intihuatana Stone, otherwise known as the Hitching Post of the Sun. Let's start off with the Temple of the Sun. It was constructed in a semicircle on top of a granite rock, and there's also a tower with a trapezoidal window. And like most things in Machu Picchu, we aren't sure what the purpose of the temple was, but we do have some educated guesses. The first, that it was used as a solar observatory. Every year during the winter solstice, the trapezoidal window is lit up by the sun. The Temple of the 3 Windows is located in the southwestern part of the main plaza. What makes the temple so special are the 3 windows. These are the largest windows that we have found to be constructed by the Inca as of yet. Also located in the main plaza is the Inuitthena Stone, which is thought to have been a ceremonial sundial. The pillar and the pedestal were actually carved out of a single piece of granite, and stands at 1.8 meters tall. But unfortunately, in the year 2000, a beer commercial was being filmed there, and they actually damaged part of the monument. This leads us to one of the most interesting facts about Machu Picchu. It's one of the only sites that survived the Spanish colonizers. This allowed the site to be preserved, and the Inuitthena Stone is one of the only that escaped the Spanish destruction. The Spanish conquistadors started to pillage and do other things that YouTube won't allow me to say here through South America in the early 1500s. By 1532, they had entered Peru, led by conquistador Francisco Pizarro, but the site of Machu Picchu was actually abandoned by the Inca just before the Spanish fully colonized Peru. As I've said, Machu Picchu was lost to time and it became overgrown. It was possibly visited in 1867 by a German adventurer, Augusta Burns, but it wasn't until 1911 that the site would become known to the world, when Hiram Bingham was led to the site by Melchor Ortega. Bingham paid Ortega 1 Peruvian sol to take him to the ruins, that Bingham, before even seeing the ruins, described them as, without the slightest expectation of finding anything more interesting than the ruins of 2 or 3 stone houses. As they made their way up the mountain to the ruins, they came across 2 locals that had already cleared out part of the terraces for farming. These terraces were the first glimpse of Machu Picchu that he would see, but he couldn't quite grasp just what he was about to see. He wrote them off initially, saying there was nothing to be excited about, comparing them to other terraces that are around the Urubamba Valley. However, he eventually found himself standing in front of a stone house, and he said it was made of the finest Inca stonework. In 1915, Bingham led the first excavations on the site. Then in 1934, Peruvian archaeologist Luis Farscal led the next set of excavations. In 1983, Machu Picchu was added to the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and it's now a popular tourist attraction. The problem is, with the tourists come destruction. So if you're visiting Machu Picchu, please be respectful, or any archaeological site for that matter. Machu Picchu is an amazing site that deserves to be on the list of modern wonders. By escaping destruction from the Spanish, it shows us what other Inca sites could have looked like in their prime. I want to thank you all for watching, and I want to thank my crew over at Patreon for helping support the channel. If you want access to exclusive content in the Brad's Labs Discord, then maybe consider heading over to Patreon and signing up today.